Joe Fann of Seattle Sports joins us to talk about betting on the M's, how far the Mariners could go in the playoffs, and more on today's episode of Locked On Mariners. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Ty Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered all season long with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe to the show and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you want to hear from us even more, consider signing up for our Patreon. The link, as well as our social accounts, are in the description of this show, wherever you're watching or listening to this. Joe Fann is going to join us a little later on to talk about the Mariners' run to the postseason and how aggressive bettors should get on Seattle in October. I also had to sneak a little Russell Wilson and the Seahawks in there for the former Seahawks beat reporter. But before that, Colby and I are going to dive a little bit into this Mariners-Angels series starting tonight. It's a weird weekend series that starts on Friday, ends on Monday instead of Sunday, which is especially strange when you consider the fact that the Mariners have had an abundance of off days over the last week or so. Couldn't have put one of those next Monday instead of Thursday and instead started the series on Thursday. Whatever. I digress. It's going to be a really fun series from a pitching perspective, however. We got Robbie Ray on the bump tonight against Michael Lorenzen, and then tomorrow, that's the marquee matchup, George Kirby versus Shohei Ohtani. Finally, Marco Gonzalez against Reed Detmers on Sunday, and then Jose Suarez takes the bump for the Angels on Monday against, who is it on Monday?
Suarez?
It's Gilbert. It's Logan Gilbert for the Mariners against Jose Suarez. Yes. Okay, so yeah, we got 4 really fun pitching matchups here. Obviously the one that stands out the most is Kirby versus Ohtani, but what's your feel on all the matchups?
Mariners sweep. They score 7 off of Ohtani because the Angels have clearly given up. Although, how would we know? They play like they've given up since April, so who really knows the difference? No, I think the Ohtani Kirby one is obviously the good one, so to speak. Maybe not for the Mariners offense, but it's probably the most fun matchup. Kirby's on a roll right now. Ohtani is Ohtani, so that one's a lot of fun. Tonight, you should have a really good opportunity to win this game. Ray has dominated the Angels this year. Lorenzen, not so much, and there's been some controversy around Lorenzen every time he pitches against the Mariners. So, we'll see how that goes. But I think tonight's matchup is probably the most lopsided one. And then we'll see how the Mariners fare against the 2 lefties that they're going to face. In theory, the Mariners should handle left-handed pitching quite well because Sam Haggerty's really good against lefties. Obviously, Julio and Gino are really good against lefties. Carlos Santana is really good against lefties, but for whatever reason, the Mariners against lefties, not that good. So hopefully they can start to correct that. But I think overall the pitching matchups certainly favor Seattle. It's nice that you have your one of your 3 best going up against Ohtani. It's just one of those things that the Mariners rotation as a whole is kind of on a roll right now. So you have to feel pretty good on a night in, night out basis. There's still obviously Ohtani in the lineup. There's still Mike Trout back in the lineup, and he's been on fire just in time to play the Mariners because, of course. And then, Rengiffo's having a pretty decent year, and then it's Ward's having a pretty decent year. They could swing it a little bit. Can't pitch. So if you score runs, you're going to be fine. And I think these pitching matchups, I guess it could be better if you didn't have to face Ohtani at all. But for the most part, I feel like this worked out pretty well for you.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, if you can win 2 out of these 4 games, you're fine. You'll be fine. Just keep on, just win a couple, get out of there. You're done with the Angels after that, and then you get the A's, you get the Royals on this road trip as well, so there's going to be more opportunities to stack up some wins, and you're going to be facing, not as good pitching on both of those teams. So, yeah. The Angels are probably, I would say, maybe the peskiest of the remaining teams on the schedule, but that's not really saying much, right?
I mean, Oakland, but minus Elvis Andrus, we'll see.
Yeah. Minus Jed Lowry, minus Elvis Andrus.
Just so you guys are aware, though, if the Mariners did just go 10-10 down the stretch here, they would equal last year's win total, 90 wins, 72 losses. Baltimore would have to go, because the Mariners have the tiebreaker. Baltimore would have to go 16-4.
Yeah.
So
with matchup against the Astros, the Rays, I think the Blue Jays still
Toronto tonight. Yeah.
They're losing more than 4 games.
Yeah, just find a way to go 500. So if Seattle does lose this series, it's not ideal, obviously, but it's not the end of the world. You just have to make it up a little bit later. So, yeah, all this is about, just trying to keep some momentum going. Obviously, you want to sweep the Angels because, duh. But, yeah, it's just one of those things. Like, you just, kind of find a way, keep your head above water. Don't be surprised if the Mariners try some things that maybe don't make a lot of sense, but they are prepping for the playoffs, and that's the position they've earned based on how they played in the first 142 games. So maybe it's, hey, why are you letting Boyd face 3 righties in a row or whatever it is, right? Why are you asking Boyd to get 5 outs when Eric Swanson's ready to go? It's just one of those things. Like, they might be trying some things. They might start to, you might see some unique lineups. You might see some different configurations. It's just, they're going to experiment a little bit here. So don't be too surprised. I don't know if that starts this weekend, but don't be too surprised if you start to see some things like that don't look the same as they have for the previous 142 games. I think you might see them try a few things here and there.
Well, that kind of goes back to the conversation that we had on yesterday's episode, that this might be a prime opportunity now to get some of the guys that haven't played a lot on the back end of your roster to get some at bats, particularly guys like Jake Lamb, Abraham Toro, Taylor Trammell, just to kind of figure out who's going to make the playoff roster, who's going to make the wild card roster, who do we want to carry, and so like Colby said, you're probably going to see some guys show up in the lineup a little more often than they have in the past, just for that fact. And you might see maybe Julio get a day off, and maybe Gino gets a day off, and Ty France should definitely get at least a few days off with his wrist injury, and Mitch should definitely get a few days off if he's not going to end up landing on the IL. And if he's not in the lineup today, what are you doing? Right. Put him on the IL, call up Kelnick, it doesn't matter, and just roll with it. There's just no point. If he can't play after 4 straight days off, he needs to go on the IL. Well, and that's past the point that you can retroactively put him on for the day that he first suffered the injury too, because it's only 3 days that you can do it for.
So you can still get him on the 10-day IL, and he'll only be out 7 days. But yeah, you could have done that.
You could have saved a day is basically what I'm saying.
Basically 2. You could have saved 2. And so we'll see how that goes. By the way, we have a little bit of news.
Okay.
Nothing serious, but Dylan Moore has been added to the Tacoma Rainiers roster. He will begin his rehab assignment.
Okay, so he is going to get a rehab stint.
It is being described as brief. So maybe he's in Anaheim by the end of the series. So, yeah, I would think that he's probably going to be with Seattle, I would say by Monday, before they head out to Oakland. Where are they going at? Texas?
They're not going to Texas. They don't have Texas anymore. I think they're going to go to Oakland and Kansas City on this series. But I don't think they're going to Texas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, they're going to Oakland after this, and then it's Kansas City. Yeah, and then they're done on the road until the postseason.
Right.
If
so
they're
they could
going
just
on the road in the postseason.
Well, they'll have to eventually, unless if they go 0-2 at home.
Exactly what I was saying. Yes.
Yeah. I just wanted to spell it out for people. So I guess there's really you could just wait and he can meet the team in Oakland. I was thinking if they're going to go to Kansas City after this, you probably just want him to fly with you to Kansas City. But he could just meet the team in Oakland. So I would say by next Tuesday, Dylan Moore will be back, and barring a setback, and hopefully he can swing it a little bit, because again, it would be nice to give JP a few days off here down the stretch run, and just pray that helps somehow because. Ugh.
Yeah, well, and again too, because the rehab stint is going to be brief for Demo, and he hasn't played since August 28th. You're going to want to get him in some games here so he can, shake the rust off a little bit as best as he can. So, yeah. So, like I said, you're probably going to see a lot of reserves making appearances and lineups over the next couple weeks, and maybe that starts tonight. We'll see. Maybe the lineup's out by the time that you're watching this, and either that's confirmed or denied. But I would say that even if it doesn't happen tonight, we're probably going to start seeing stuff like that happen relatively soon. So we're going to check in with Joe Fann of Seattle Sports and WynnBet in just a moment to talk about the Mariners postseason run and how he views the Mariners from a betting perspective in just a second. But real quick, a reminder, this episode of Locked On Mariners is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your #1 source for all your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. Find all the latest football developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts. It is also your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. It is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline is where the game starts. If you're a Seattle sports fan, you likely know our next guest. He used to cover the Seahawks for NBC Sports Northwest and is now a brand ambassador for WynnBet and hosts the Bet to Win podcast with Joe Fann. You can also find some of his written work over on Seattle Sports on mynorthwest.com. Joe Fann, thanks for coming on. How's it going, man?
I'm doing great. Appreciate the invite, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for hopping on. I reached out, of course, to have you do a video for our special episode that we're doing, and we'll use this time real quick as a reminder that you should join Joe and getting a video in and telling us what the Mariners making the postseason would mean to you. So, Joe, what is your favorite part of this Mariners team right now? Just overall.
Man, I think it's how much fun they have playing together. That sounds super cheesy. But like the buy-in and the belief that the clubhouse evidently has on a day-to-day basis is just so refreshing, because how many teams have we seen that are apathetic and just playing the string out to where they got to get to game 162 so they can get out, enjoy their offseason, and figure out what's next in their career path. It's not, I'm here for the long haul. I want to be a part of the success of this team and be a building block for a franchise that, deserves a winner. I'm here for a year, maybe two. I'll try to make the most of it, but then who knows what's next. And, we've kind of seen so many players just be ships in the night. So I think for me, it's the chemistry. It makes this team really easy to root for and a lot of fun to watch, because, whether they're down early, whatever, or down late, as you saw against Atlanta on Sunday, you always feel like they've got a shot, which is not something we could say about a lot of Mariners teams we've seen over the last 21 years.
Joe, you've been in person for a lot of crazy games, particularly over at Lumen Field, CenturyLink, whatever you want to call it. What is it with Seattle sports teams, and why can they not play in normal games?
There's something about the Pacific Northwest air, apparently. I think a lot of people thought, especially with the Seahawks, that the weirdness of their games was a Russell Wilson trait, and it's not just Russell Wilson, very evidently, based on what we saw on Monday. And so, I don't know the answer to that question, but it certainly makes a lot of these games very stressful to watch. And I think every Seattle sports fan has had a number of semi-heart attacks, proverbially speaking, of course, watching these teams. But it's never dull, that's for sure. But, again, it's fun, and I'm down for chaos ball that continues. And again, we want to look for reasons why this team might have a chance to win. The chaos ball comes from a belief and an effort at doing the little things. And when you can just do your job, that sets you above so many other teams, particularly bad teams, who are often incapable of doing so. And we've seen the Mariners get a couple of free wins this year. Again, something else we're not used to seeing, just because the fundamentals escape some teams, especially bad ones.
Yeah, the carryover from last year, and that's indicative of Scott Service's leadership, of course, and just how they do the little things so well, from the defense to the base running, all that. They're so just well put together. I'm really curious, and I see you wearing the Edgar shirt. I'm really curious about your Mariners fan story. How did this start? How did this obsession with this team start for you?
It's been my whole life, to be honest. I mean, the Mariners, baseball was my first love. I grew up in Bothell,
same.
so just 30 minutes north of Seattle. Baseball is my first love, So I remember going to games at the Kingdome. I remember the fireworks. I remember how loud it was. And that was, I was young. Some of my first memories are watching Mariners games, going to Mariners games. I remember being in my living room, the 95 for Edgar's double. I was, 6 years old. I can't think of many memories I have prior to that. So, I grew to love the Sonics, but less so in the 90s, even though they were really good. I was just a Mariners baseball guy. And my love for the Sonics came more in the Ray Allen era, Rashard Lewis era. And then with the Seahawks, it was with Hasselbeck and Alexander, more in the early to mid 2000s. So for me, it was all baseball all the time growing up. And, because the love was always there, but then of course the Sonics leave. So I'm not a fan of an NBA team anymore, even though I still love hoops and I miss the Sonics a bunch. When you get into reporting, where I covered the Titans for 1 year, the Niners for 4.5, and then the Seahawks for 2, and you sort of have to take your fandom out of it at that point in order to do the job correctly, and at least in my opinion. And so I wouldn't even say at this point that I'm really a Seahawks fan. I want them to do well because all my friends and family want them to do well. And I want people who follow me to be happy and whatever. I'm not like rooting against them by any means, but it's just different. So really, for a long time now, it's been the Mariners are sort of all I've got. I like Gonzaga hoops. I like UW football. Didn't go to either school, so it doesn't feel as authentic. So, it really puts more pressure on the Mariners as that's my one team that, I get it during baseball season. I get to, wake up every day and look forward to watching them play every night. And, even when in the bad seasons, you're just grateful to have baseball and be at the ballpark and all that. But certainly this is more fun, and I can't wait I don't even know if my body is ready for playoff baseball and what that anxiety is going to be like. But I'm ready to find out. I can't wait. I think I'm gonna watch the game by myself because I'm gonna be such a lunatic. I don't think I can be seen in public watching the game. So, I can't wait, man. But yeah, that's sort of my story in terms of my love for this team.
Yeah, for me, I live in the Toronto area. I moved out of Washington when I was 12, and so I haven't been back to T-Mobile Park since. But a lot of folks, a lot of people that listen to the show, they're like, "Oh, Ty's rooting for the Mariners to come to Toronto. He's rooting for them to play the Blue Jays." I don't know, man, because I don't know if I could do that. I don't know, especially in a hostile environment. I don't know if I could contain myself like for the first playoff series in 20 years for the Mariners. I don't know if I could do that, man. I think I need to watch that on my own.
How would you be welcomed at that stadium wearing Mariners gear?
I don't know. Like, it's been fine when I've gone like during the regular season, but yeah, we've heard some stories about how things go at Rogers Center, and like I've personally seen how they've treated a Bruins fan after the Bruins knocked the Leafs out of the postseason. And I saw a guy get like popcorn thrown at him, beer thrown at him for wearing a Bruins jersey. So, I don't know. I don't know how it would go. And I feel like maybe part of the reason that no one really gives me a hard time during the regular season is because, no one has seen the Mariners as a threat. And still some people don't really see the Mariners as a threat, and, they're going to learn. They're going to learn next month.
Exactly.
They're going to learn today. So, yeah, but I'm totally with you, man. Like, I don't know if I could actually be out in public during a Mariners game. I get like crazy over regular season games, and like just knowing how I was during like Seahawks postseason football, like 2013, even when it was like, all right, they're the best team in the world right now. Like even then they're playing the Saints and I'm freaking out, like, every single snap. So yeah, so tell me a bit more about your feelings going into the postseason with this team. Where do you think they could? How far do you think they could take this?
I'm sort of going through this thought process today. It's interesting you asked that question because my latest story for SeattleSports.com is going to be 5 moments that should make you believe the Mariners are capable of making a postseason run. And I think it's starting to shift already from, gosh, I hope they make the playoffs, to what can they do in the playoffs. they're going to make the playoffs. I mean, it would take such a catastrophic and historic collapse at this point, combined with Baltimore going on just an insane run, which is unforeseen given their schedule the rest of the way. So if they don't make the playoff, you can come back and blame me, whatever, that's fine. I guess I'll wear that. But they're going to be in the playoffs. Keep the champagne, or keep the cork in the champagne. That moment will come, but we can accept that, given what the numbers are, where they're at, who they play the final 20 games, and just the current standings. But you look at matchups, they can take 2 of 3 against anybody in a wild card series. Would they be favored? Maybe not. But they have a better pitching staff than Toronto. It's probably a wash with Tampa. And I think they'd probably be favored over any AL Central team. Or maybe if they're, as the road team, it'd be a pick 'em, or they'd be slight underdogs. But I think if you just look at the rosters, you'd say there's no reason why the Mariners shouldn't win. So getting the number 1 wild card seed would be huge. Getting to play at home would be huge. That's a big emotional thing for me, is having them make the playoffs, have the streak end, but then not getting a home game would be gravely disappointing. And so I'm hoping that that's where my attention is right now. I'm less concerned of whether they'll make the playoffs as opposed to whether they'll have the chance to host a game. Mm-hmm. But outside of Houston, because I think Houston is sort of, name X sports movie that has this big bad team they can't beat till the very end. Whether it's I don't know, Little Giants or whatever. I mean, we can go down the list. But like outside of that, they've already beat the Yankees in 2 different series. They've swept the Blue Jays. They have struggled with the Rays this year, but dominated them last year. And that lineup, I think, against the Mariners pitching staff, you'd like to give the advantage to the Mariners pitching staff. So I don't think, even though they'll be the underdog, I don't think it's impossible that they go on a run. Does that mean World Series? Probably not. But I feel confident enough, especially in the pitching staff, and they have enough pop in the lineup to where, yeah, they might have a game where they get shut out. I mean, the game 1 against the Padres is a perfect example. They get shut out. Yu Darvish is dealing whatever, but all of a sudden you make couple bad pitches the next day, and you're down 3 runs in the bottom of the first inning with Julio and Eugenio Suarez going yard. So I think there's enough there. I don't know, man. I'm like talking myself into it right now because I do think this team can be dangerous. I don't see a reason why. Again, the Astros seem like the pinnacle of the mountain to climb, and they would obviously make me the most nervous. Beyond that, I'd feel like this team can go toe-to-toe with anybody. I think they feel like that, which is cool. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're thinking, well, and they have too. Then we're good.
And they have too, right? Like, even against the Astros, yeah, they lost their season set with the Astros, but it wasn't a complete blowout,
No, from the tide is shifting, certainly.
And they just took a series from the defending champs. They just split a series with the Padres with Juan Soto and Manny Machado and all these superstars on their team. They've taken series from the Yankees, like you mentioned, taken series from the Blue Jays, and that Rays series, or both of the Rays series that they had so long ago back, like that was a whole different team back in April and May, really, that we're talking about. And pitching reigns supreme in the postseason. They have arguably the best bullpen in all of baseball, if not one of the best that are going to enter the postseason field. On top of that, they have one of the best rotations, and especially one of the best 1-2-3s with Kirby and Castillo and Ray, and then you have Logan Gilbert in there as well. Like that team can go up against.
Why shouldn't you
anyone.
Be confident in that?
Exactly.
You're selling me even harder. Like, why, as a Mariners fan, why shouldn't you hear that and think, okay, let's do it. Let's see what happens.
Exactly. I talked about this. I think it was a couple episodes ago. We were talking about how far this team can go, and it's just, I look at the rest of the field. Yankees, Mariners can beat them. Rays, Mariners can beat them. Blue Jays, Mariners can beat them. Guardians, we know they can beat them. Like, I think the path is very clear. Now, let me ask you from a betting aspect, how aggressive should people get on the Mariners when betting on them in the postseason?
Well, I have $100 on them to win the World Series, and I got it all the way back at 75-1. So that's a big enough number to where I can hedge immediately and make it a profitable ticket. I think for me, throw a little on the World Series. Why not? Throw some beer money on it. I'm one I can't wait to cash. I've got Julio Rodriguez at plus 650 with a couple $100 to cash eventually. But that's a foregone conclusion at this point. I think you're going to get the Mariners at a plus number in every series. So, maybe that's the way to do it. Put some beer money on them to win the World Series, and then put $50 in the wild card round. And if they make it through, put another $50 on the divisional round, and just kind of keep going. And as long as they make it to the first round, you're guaranteed a profit, because again, I'm anticipating them being the underdog in every series unless they get that 1 seed and they're playing either the Rays or the Blue Jays at home. But even then, it's either going to be even money or just below or just under, So they're not going to be a heavy favorite no matter who they play. It's just the nature of the beast when you haven't made the playoffs in 21 years. The betting market, especially the national betting market, the money is going to come in. The public money will be against the Mariners. I can guarantee it. So, yeah, I think there's plenty of value. Well, listen, we just talked about how they have a chance against anybody. So why not put some faith in the Mariners and say they can win each and every series and just bet the series prices?
So before I let you go, you're not a credentialed writer anymore for the Seahawks. I know you said that you're not necessarily a fan anymore.
Yeah.
But beating Russ. What'd you think Monday?
Man, I said going in.
I felt great. Because I've kind of
you just want to see chaos.
Yeah.
And that was sort of what I was rooting for. Here's my thing: is I sort of I'm defensive of Seahawks fans who really wanted to win that game when other people come in and say, "How could you boo Russell Wilson? How could you not bow at his feet for what he did for the Seahawks?" And look, these guys all got cheered when they went back, and it's classless from Seahawks fans to have booed him. And to me, that's such an oversimplification of who Russ is, what all went down, how long and drawn out it was. I think everyone, and I wouldn't have booed him myself. I'm just saying I understand people who felt like that was their Super Bowl and they really wanted to beat Russ, and they were happy to let him hear it a little bit when he took the field and throughout that game. I think every one of those people would tell you they're grateful for Russ and what he did in a Seahawks uniform. But I think there's a reason why he's not revered in the way of Bobby, KJ, Marshawn. He's just so hard to relate to. And he's so corny. And the way he uses social media is so brutal. And I think at first people loved his shtick. And then I think it was like, would tolerate his shtick. And now that he's not in Seattle anymore, it's like, now we don't have to pretend we think he's cool. Yeah. And that might be really harsh. It might be unfair, but I think there's something to it. Bobby Wagner's going to get cheered unanimously when he comes back with the Rams. So what is it about Russ? That's what I want other fans to ask. And they might say, well, it doesn't matter because what he did should be good enough. But those same fans are clowning on Russ for the Let's Ride stuff and all of his social media posts and the TikTok and whatever. Dude, this guy's nauseating. But Seahawks fans have to love him. There's a reason why he's such a complicated figure in Seahawks sports history. And he will have his day in the sun where he goes into the Ring of Honor and he gets cheered in front of a packed house. And he'll have that moment to bask in his glory of what he did in Seattle. And absolutely rightfully so. But in the here and now, when fans spend all off season, looking at the let's ride, all this stuff, we're just like, okay, I've had enough.
Yeah.
That's sort of how I feel. I don't dislike Russ. I don't root against him. But yeah, he's sort of painful to follow, and he's not a very relatable dude. And I think that is really hard when it comes to his brand. It resonates well with moms who want him to be a good example for their children. And he is. He's a great human who does amazing things. I don't think anyone would argue otherwise.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But he just gets on people's nerves. And when he's not your guy anymore, it's sort of feel the free reign to not have to admit otherwise.
Yeah.
Was that fair? Was that too aggressive? Or
no, that was totally fair. Because I'm in the same boat too, right? And having covered the Seahawks, not credentialed, but being right underneath Corbin, who is credentialed still, and just kind of being in that realm and covering the team from that side of things, I became less of a fan. But Monday night, that all kind of came back for a few hours, right? Because it's just you look at Russ, you look at what like last year, after Adam Schefter tweeted out the 4 teams, Mark Rodgers gave him the 4 teams, blah blah blah, and then Russell has the audacity to go up to the mic and say, "I didn't request a trade." Like, come on. Like, we know what's going on here, man.
There's a lot of the whole saga was playing people for fools a lot, and it came from the Seahawks too. Pete Carroll saying, everything's fine. You guys, it's a media created thing. It's like, it's not a media created thing. Just stop it. Like, stop. And that's what kind of drives me nuts about the whole thing is like, a lot of. I think Russ is a pretty genuine person. I don't think he does things out of trying to be shady or whatever, or someone he's not. I genuinely think that's him. But because it's so hard to relate to, it comes off as disingenuous quite a bit. It's like, I'm not an idiot, and I feel like you're trying to pretend like I'm an idiot. There's enough smoke here to know something's going on. So stop telling me it's nothing. And then, especially as a media member, it's like, don't blame the media. Yeah. Come on with that. So, yeah, man, it's crazy. And I think now that's out of everyone's system. I don't think if the Broncos were to come back, down the road, it would be as bad. But game 1, wounds are fresh. It's his first game. Seahawks' first game without him. I mean, even Pete Carroll. Look at the quotes from Pete Carroll this week with Mike Salk and after the game and whatever. We know he's got an ego. Everybody has one. He's a competitor. There's probably a reason why he's still coaching. It's largely ego. Even though he could retire years ago and rode off into the sunset with all his money he's made. But he hasn't peeled back the curtain and displayed it so publicly the way he has since that game. And even before the game, not telling fans to boo, but essentially telling fans to boo him. Mm-hmm. I saw some Seahawks be like, he didn't say that. It's like, well, he did not say it. Like, come on. We can read between the lines here. Mm. And after the game, saying how much it meant more than just the first game of the season. Well, that's very different than Pete Carroll. Normally, every game's a championship opportunity. We treat them all the same, whatever. Mm-hmm. So I kind of liked it. Again, I think the same thing with Pete people have to say about Russ. Like, I just want transparency. Like, we know how you feel. Like, so stop telling us you don't feel that way. Mm-hmm. Because you're human. So of course that meant a little bit more, and there's some pride on the line. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so credit to him for saying it.
Yeah, I love that he was very candid, and he's been very candid even ever since, right? Like he didn't pop off on Sunday and then come back Monday and be like, well, it was just it was another game, whatever. No, he kind of doubled down, right? Like on the interview with Salk,
and I respect him for it.
Yeah, I respect him. I respect the hell out of Pete and everything that he's done, and I'm happy for him. I'm happy that he was able to get that win. I'm happy for Geno Smith. I'm just happy for that whole team because they had to listen to it for the last 5 months, and ever since the schedule came out, ever since we knew that this was going to be week 1, Russell Wilson coming back to Seattle, the whole narrative is it's the Russ game, it's the Russ game, it's the Russ game, but that completely overlooks the fact that it's just another football game at the end of the day. And those guys in the ugly green uniforms really wanted to win that game. And, it was just awesome. It was awesome to hear like Shelby Harris pop off after the game. It was very reminiscent of like old Seahawks, like back, the chip on the shoulder Seahawks, right? Like that's what you love to see. It's just Pete Carroll ball to a T. And the way that they won that game was very Pete Carroll to a T. And it was awesome. It was very, it was a really good football game in general. Great way to open up the season. Joe, I really appreciate you hopping on here. Remind the folks real quick where they can find your work.
Yeah, WynnBet.com, SeattleSports.com, and I'm on Twitter at Joe_Fann. But man, I appreciate you having me. It's been a lot of fun having the conversation, and hopefully we can have more of them throughout these MLB playoffs. And hopefully the Mariners will be in beyond the wild card round.
Yeah, for sure. It's gonna be crazy, man. It's gonna be crazy, but it's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, Joe.
Appreciate you.
All right. Thank you again to Joe Fann for joining us today. And that's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Ty Dane Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Dane Gonzalez, that's DANEGNZLZ, and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. And thank you again for making us your first listen. Now make your second listen, the Locked On MLB podcast. MLB expert Paul Francis Sullivan brings humor humor, passion, and unique perspective on every team and the biggest stories around the league. Follow the #1 daily league-wide podcast, Locked On MLB, on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts, just like us. And with that, have yourself a beautiful baseball weekend, and we'll see you next week. Peace. Go M's.